I lived in Arizona my entire life, born and raised just outside of Phoenix. And yet, I never really spent that much time outside. And I know that probably sounds ridiculous to anybody who doesn't live here, but unless you grow up in one of those hiking boots, SPF 70 camelback families, you don't exactly wake up one day and decide to start walking around in the desert heat. So as a kid, I preferred air conditioning and late night TV to dust and heat strokes. That all changed in my 30s though. I don't know exactly what triggered it, probably a combination of aging anxiety and far too many Instagram reels of people smiling all the while they scaled sandstone cliffs. But I ended up getting into fitness. At first it was indoor stuff, home workouts, nothing too extreme, but after I dropped 20 pounds and got my legs underneath me, I realized I wanted more than just a treadmill. I wanted sky, rocks, real trail underneath my feet. Something that made me feel like I was earning my heartbeats. So I started small, local trails, easy loops. I hiked solo most of the time since I didn't know too many people into the same stuff as me, and I kinda liked it that way honestly. I planned meticulously, my water ratios, first aid kits, maps printed and downloaded. It gave me a sense of control in a world that otherwise felt like it could fall apart at any second. Once I got confident, I made a bucket list, just a note inside my phone. Arizona trails to conquer, and right at the top was the Superstition Mountains. It wasn't the legends, although I guess those helped. The gold mines, the disappearances, cryptic warnings carved into stone. There is something undeniably spooky about the superstitions, but more than that, it really felt like a rite of passage, like if I could hike there and walk away, I would have proven something to myself. I didn't want to go alone this time though. Far too many horror stories and the terrain was pretty serious. So I booked a guided tour, late spring, manageable weather with a well-reviewed local guide whose name was Derek Kreider. He advertised as this special loop to the Hackberry Springs, ending in a secret canyon that he swore hardly anybody knew about. That kind of hidden place you only get to see once, or at least so the website claimed. It sounded perfect though. There were 12 of us total, Derek included. A mix of college kids, weekend warriors, and a couple who brought a drone for content. We met early and loaded up, then set off towards the trailhead in a pair of beat-up SUVs. The sun was already up, but the heat wasn't unbearable yet. Derek had that easy, half-sarcastic energy, a guy who's done this 100 times over and still managed to make it sound like an adventure. I had no idea what was waiting for us that day. No clue how fast a good day could go sideways so quickly out there. But I do remember the way the rocks looked that morning, pale red, jagged and ancient, and I remember thinking to myself, this is the most beautiful place I've ever been. But that feeling did not last long. The hike started off exactly how I'd hoped it to. The first few miles of Hackberry Springs were easy to moderate. Dry creek crossings, sandy paths winding through Mesquite and Palo Verde. Enough elevation to feel it, but not enough to kill the morale. Everybody was really chatty at first, comparing protein bars, snapping occasional photos, asking Derek about the local wildlife. He would point out old wagon ruts, petroglyphs in the cliff face, even this massive cactus that was shaped like a tuning fork. It got fast though. The forecast had said mid-80s, but by 10 a.m., we were already all roasting. The air hung still between the canyon walls, and the sun bounced off every pale surface like we were walking through an oven. I'd packed plenty of water, but the others weren't as prepared as me. A guy named Mateo from the back half of the group started dragging his feet, red-faced and silent. Derek kept the pace steady, but I could tell he was watching him. "There's no shame in turning around," he called back once. But if we are going to go forward, you need to stay hydrated and speak up if anything feels wrong. Understood? Nobody wanted to be the one who tapped out, so we continued on. Around noon, we hit the turnoff. Derek led us away from the main loop, off the official trail and into tighter terrain. The walls were now closing in, the plant life had thickened, deadfall cluttered the path ahead. We had to step over twisted mesquite limbs and crusted logs jammed with spider webs. I recognized the signs of old flood damage, stripped bark, half-buried branches, debris jammed high in the crooks of the trees. It wasn't dangerous, exactly, but it wasn't beginner-friendly either, if that makes sense. "This is it," Derek said, standing at the mouth of a narrow slot canyon. "Locals call it Dead Man's Draw. Creepy name, right? Don't worry though, it's just a superstition. No pun intended." The group laughed, more from nerves I'm assuming than amusement. The draw was narrow and shaded, which brought this brief and much needed relief from the sun. The temperature also dropped fast in there, almost unnaturally, like walking into a cave. The canyon floor was uneven and partially wet, dotted with shallow pools that smelled faintly of decay and algae. The silence here was different too. No birds or bugs, just our breathing and the soft crunch of our footsteps underneath us. We stopped for lunch under the overhang, everybody grateful for a little bit of rest. People were peeling off their packs and eating in tight groups. A girl in a teal tank top asked Derek where the draw led, and he shrugged. It's a dead end. Big boulder pile up at the far end. Makes for good photos though, but we will stop there and loop back the long way." Somebody asked where he was going when he wandered off with his pack slung low. Nature calls," Derek muttered. "And I kinda need a minute to cool down." And that was the last thing he said before everything changed. The scream came maybe 5 minutes later, crazy and panicked. Someone calling out for help. We all leaped up. I remember the drone guy dropping his protein bar and sprinting ahead. I followed him and one of the college kids up the rocky incline where Derek had disappeared off into. We found him laying on his side in the tall grass. His shirt was soaked in sweat. His face was pale like milk. He was gripping his calf and scooting backward like something was still chasing him. A few feet in front of him, nestled in a coil beside a sun-warmed boulder, sat the biggest rattlesnake I've ever seen. It wasn't moving, it was just watching, coiled like a tire, thick-bodied and stone still, its rattle twitching slowly like a detonator. Every ounce of this creature was telling us to fuck off. Derek's voice was cracking when he spoke. I stepped on it, I didn't even see it. It felt like somebody stabbed a railroad spike into my leg." His leg was already growing dark from where the venom had gone in. 2 perfect little holes on the inside of his calf, angry and swelling. One of the college kids looked like he was about to throw up. We kept everybody back and somebody radioed for help using Derek's pack. We had signal, barely, and managed to get this short message out before the battery dipped into critical. I remember thinking how stupid it was to have only one radio on a trip like this. Back in the draw, people were panicking in quiet ways, biting nails, whispering worst-case scenarios to one another, checking their own legs for snake bites. We built a makeshift stretcher out of trekking poles and a tarp, lashed with paracord from one guy's gear pouch. Lifting Derek onto that was not easy. He screamed like his skin was being peeled off. His leg was swelling bad now, calf bloated tight, skin turning a blotchy purple-green. He was shaking, rolling a bit, trying to joke but not making much sense to anybody. We started hauling him back out, but that slot canyon suddenly felt 10 miles longer now than before. Every rock was a trip hazard, every branch clawed out at us. The air grew hotter again, thicker, like we were being boiled. And then, out of nowhere, the sun went down, fast. 1 second we had this golden light trickling over the rock walls, and the next it was gone, shadows swallowing up everything. The draw turned black, and the temperature immediately plummeted. People started shivering immediately. We didn't pack for the cold, just desert heat. Even Derek, semi-conscious, started clenching his arms over his chest like he was freezing to death. And then, as if it couldn't get any worse, we started hearing the howls. Not distant, not echoing off the valley walls. These were actually close, short and sharp, coming from multiple directions. Coyotes, dozens of them, bouncing off the rock walls. Somebody I heard, I don't know who, muttered, "They're just curious, they won't come close." But they definitely did. We saw one, a long, lean thing with patchy fur and pale yellow eyes, staring from a ledge above us. Then another, lower, ears flat and body tense. Scouts, coming to size us up. Derek tried to sit up, dazed completely. "They smell blood," he whispered. We knew we could not keep moving in the dark. The trail was far too dangerous without any light, and we were out of phone battery and had no flares. So we climbed a boulder, big with a flat top, and high off the canyon floor, and huddled together, 12 of us, breathing cold air and listening to the circling coyotes. They never lunged, never charged, but they never left either. They just watched us. We passed the hours in silence, each one of us trying to not lose it completely. Looking out into the long, haunting shadows of the desert was absolutely terrifying. Every subtle shift would bring on a heart attack. Waiting for the sound of rescue, or the sound of teeth. I'm not even sure what hour it was when I first saw the light. At one point, time had stopped meaning really anything to me. We were just shapes curled against one another on that rock, frozen stiff, barely saying anything. Derek had gone quiet an hour before. His leg was like a balloon now, hot to the touch and oozing black around the bite. I kept one of my hands on his chest just to make sure that it was rising and falling. It did keep rising, but it was shallow and fading quickly. Those coyotes were still out there. I could hear them padding over loose stone, sniffing. One of them barked once, short and sharp. They never attacked, but they never backed off either. It was like they really were waiting us out. A couple of people started crying, and I guess I don't blame them. We were all one mistake away from bleeding, from falling, from losing what little hope that we had left. But then came that flicker, dim at first, far up the canyon, blinking once and then steady. A headlamp, then another. Voices soon followed, shouting commands, flashlights sweeping across the canyon floor. "Search and rescue," one of them called out. "Hold your position." We all shouted back, some screamed. One of the college kids started sobbing like he'd been holding in for hours. I just sat there for a moment, frozen in place, unsure if my legs would even work anymore. They came quickly, 6 of them in tactical gear and rescue packs. 2 climbed the boulder without hesitation, checking vitals and asking questions. I told them about what had happened, and I told them how long Derek had been out, and they didn't sugarcoat anything. "We have to get him out of here right now. He's critical. You all did good, but time's out." They strapped him into a harness and lifted him down. The rest of us followed in a loose, broken line. The coyotes finally scattered when those lights came, but the sound of them, those nails on stone, that circling hunger, it really stuck with me. The search and rescue guys had flare guns, and they didn't hesitate to wave them at the yotes whenever they got close. By the time we made it back to the evac trail, the chopper had arrived, rotors thumping. I watched them load Derek inside, and one of the medics turned and said, "You probably saved his life dragging him out of that slot. Snake venom moves very fast." I didn't say anything, I just nodded. My hands were still shaking beneath me. We were flown out of there 3 at a time. When my turn came, I climbed in and looked back at the mountains, those jagged silhouettes outlined against the bleeding sky. Beautiful and brutal at the same time. Derek survived, months of rehab, but he did pull through. A few of us did keep in touch after, but most didn't. I guess that kind of night would change a lot of people. You either lock it away or keep replaying it over and over until it eats you alive. I still hike to this day, but I don't do it alone anymore, and never in the Superstitions. Some places don't want to be known. Some places will take any excuse to swallow you whole. And now I know exactly what that looks like when they try. There's something about the desert that actually calms me down. Most people I know either avoid it or just tolerate it. It's too hot, too dry, too dangerous, but for me, I need it. I call it dirt therapy. I've got a lifted 4-door Jeep Wrangler with 37-inch tires and a winch up front. And when the world gets far too loud or work drives me absolutely nuts, I immediately will head east, load up a cooler, toss in my air compressor and patch kit, and I'm gone before sunrise. I've been hitting the trails for years now, Gila Bend, Table Mesa, Box Canyon, Bulldog Wash, but my favorite has always been the Superstition Mountains. It's one of those places that feels like it shouldn't exist, so close to civilization. Drive an hour from Phoenix and it's almost like the world ends. The land out there isn't just quiet, it's empty. You feel it. It doesn't matter if you've got a radio or a GPS. Once you're out past that last fence line, it's just you and the rocks. Most of those days will be routine. You get the occasional pop tire or coolant boil over. It's not that big of a deal. Nothing that can't be patched up or aired up. I've camped out there solo more times than I can even count, and I've never once felt nervous. No weird lights, no crazy shadows, no urban legends crawling out of the dark. Just the wind, the sand, and the sun. And that's exactly how I liked it. I've done 10-hour drives out there, just crawling over granite and sand, working my way through the trails that don't even have a name. And that's how I came to know every twist and turn of the landscape. I didn't even need markers anymore. I can literally read the terrain, patterns in the rocks, the way certain hills break the light in the afternoon. You do something like this long enough, it just becomes part of your system. But on the trip I'm about to tell you about, things were a lot different than before. And I'm not talking about a flat tire or a dead alternator. I mean something wrong, something that didn't belong, or I guess maybe it did. Maybe it was me that shouldn't have been out there. I mapped out a route that night before, packed up and hit the trail before 6 a.m. I was heading for a place some folks called Gripper Ridge. Steep hills, rough rocks, lots of switchbacks, perfect trail to blow off some steam and put the Jeep to work. The weather was warm, clear skies, and nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't pass a single rig on the drive out, no ATVs, no bikes, no other off-roaders. It was just me. And at the time I really didn't think much of it, but looking back now, I should have. The climb up Gripper Ridge went smoothly. Little flex on the suspension, a few tight turns, but nothing my Jeep couldn't eat up. I took it nice and easy, third gear most of the way, windows down, country music low enough to hear if something snapped outside. You learn to listen to the desert. It talks, but really quietly. I crested the top of the hill around 9 a.m., parked just shy of a rocky off-drop, and from there, you could see half the range. Jagged ridgelines, dry riverbeds, walls of rock that looked like teeth. I cracked open a bottle of water, took a few pictures from my usual Sunday post, and then decided to try a new path that I'd spotted on a satellite just a few weeks prior. It hooked down the backside of the ridge and then ran southeast into unfamiliar territory, deeper into the superstitions that I'd never gone before. The road started to narrow and it just got worse from there. The trail was washed out in spots, loose gravel packed into the cuts between boulders. But it wasn't sketchy enough to stop me. I dropped it into low gear and eased the Jeep down, tires gripping like claws. Once I made it to the ravine below, that's when things started to get weird. I saw a trail of dust ahead of me, thin, white, and moving, like somebody had just come through at a pretty good clip. I let off the gas and coasted for a minute. The Jeep idled low, soft vibrations running through the frame. I rolled my window down and leaned out. Silence. No engine sounds, no voices, no tire hum bouncing off the rocks. So I killed the engine completely, and the stillness immediately hit me like a wall. I sat there for maybe a full minute just listening, and I mean listening, straining my ears for the smallest clue, but the air around me was dead. No birds, no breeze. Even the sun felt distant to me now. Still, I figured maybe it was just the wind, maybe a dust devil had kicked it up and dragged across the trail. Stirred up some loose earth. It happens. I fired up the engine and kept going. But those dust trails didn't stop. I kept seeing them, not far off, sometimes right across the road that I was on. Little bursts of powder. No tracks, no ruts, just disturbed air and unsettled ground. 20 minutes later, I stopped again, pulled off behind a stack of fallen rocks and shut everything down. I needed to be sure. I stepped off into the heat and turned my head slowly, scanning the trail ahead of me. And that's when I saw one of those dust trails forming just 30 feet away. Nothing was causing it, no machine, no person, just a line of spinning dust ripping up the side of a hill. The path curved as it climbed, then vanished over a slope. I felt my stomach fold in on itself. The wind was not doing that. I knew wind. I'd driven through monsoons. The wind doesn't move with intention, and whatever this thing was, did. I stood there frozen, sweat pouring down my back, and that's when I heard a sound. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a motor, but it also wasn't a voice. It was low and deep, a hum almost. It was happening beneath me, vibrating up through my boots. My legs started to shake, but not from fear, from whatever was making this sound. I climbed back into the Jeep, slammed the door, and fired up the engine. I threw it in reverse, spun the wheel, and gunned it back the way I came. I didn't care anymore about rocks or washouts. I just needed to put some distance between me and whatever the hell that was. Those dirt clouds did not stop. They actually started appearing behind me now. In the mirrors I saw them, clouds of dust shooting out from the ravine walls, from side trails I hadn't seen before. Some crossed the road just after I passed. Others flanked me, racing alongside at these impossible speeds. I gritted my teeth and leaned into it, tearing through the loose rock and cutting corners far too close. My tires kicked up their own smoke trail now, and I prayed that I wouldn't bottom out or snap a drive shaft. I reached the switchback near the top of Gripper Ridge and risked a glance in the rearview mirror. And that's when I saw the spires. The whole sections of the mountain behind me were engulfed in dust, spirals rising up into the sky, moving in patterns that made absolutely no sense. Not storm-like, not random, like they were searching, turning toward me now. I kept the hammer down and made it up to the ridge, and took the downhill at a speed that could have killed me. My shocks bottomed out more than once, and I felt the whole Jeep buckle underneath me, but I didn't stop. Not even when I blew past the point where I'd taken pictures earlier. Not when I hit a wash that nearly tore my front bumper off. I didn't slow until I was back into the lower flats, the desert floor stretching out in all directions. The dust trails had stopped there, abruptly. I rolled to a stop, breathing hard. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I got out, walked a few feet, and looked back. The ridgeline was still there, jagged and unforgiving, but now there were columns of dust spinning around certain peaks, isolated, slow-turning towers of sand that caught the sun just right. I watched for around maybe 5 minutes, then got back in and drove home in silence. I didn't tell anybody shit about what just happened to me either, and I didn't go back to Gripper Ridge, not after that. I stuck to the easier stuff after that day, short runs, familiar trails, nothing that dropped me deep into the soups. I kept it surface level, safe. But still, that memory would continue to follow me. I'd be working under the Jeep or flipping through some trail maps. I'd catch myself thinking about that dust, how it moved and how it seemed to react. Eventually, I talked to this older guy that I knew through a parts shop out in Apache Junction. Real quiet type, but super smart. Used to be search and rescue. Knew the superstitions like the back of his own hand. We were in the back of the store checking tire prices and figured I'd ask. Hey, I got a random question. You ever seen anything weird out near Gripper Ridge? He didn't even blink. What kind of weird? I told him piece by piece. Left the more dramatic stuff out though. Just told him I saw some dust trails where there shouldn't have been any. No vehicles, no people, just movement. Fast and very unpredictable. He nodded once, slowly. You were, probably near the heat vents. Vents? I asked. Heat shafts, or maybe old mine exhausts. Nobody knows for sure. Supposedly they're all over the soups. Deep cracks that run underground. Sometimes they release hot air, real sudden-like. People say it messes with your head. Hallucinations, pressure drops. Can make it feel like the ground's moving. Might be full of chemicals too. Like a heat stroke? He shook his head at me. Not quite. It doesn't matter how hydrated you are, it's different, rare, but it happens. Guys have pulled out of the area with migraines, nosebleeds, full-on panic mode. Some say it's the rocks, and others will tell you it's gas left over from old mining ops. He didn't elaborate, and I thanked him for his time and took it at face value. Laughing gas escaping old minds, huh? Cool. I can dig it. So I wrote it off as one. A strange moment, maybe a pocket of hot air or something that I inhaled without even knowing. But I will tell you this, I've been off-roading a long time. I've driven in every kind of heat and altitude and terrain this state has to offer, and I've never felt or seen anything like that. And it scared the absolute hell out of me. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I felt. Something was out there, something watching, and for a few moments, I think I got close enough for it to notice me too. And that's all the reason I need to stay clear, because some places just aren't meant for us. I've hiked most of Arizona, South Rim to the North Border, from dusty little slots outside Tucson to Ponderosa trails above Flagstaff. I don't do it for social media or some grand challenge. I do it because I really like the silence. I like the way your thoughts straighten out after a few hours of no cell service and nothing but the trail underneath you. I used to hike solo almost exclusively, still do, just not as often. There's something about being alone out there, especially overnight. It just resets your brain. You feel everything more. The way the wind moves, the weight of your own breath. It's like the land has its own heartbeat, and if you're quiet, you can line right up with it. This story took place a few years back. It was late fall heading into winter, which in Arizona means perfect hiking weather. 80s during the day, 50s at night. I was between jobs and had a few days to kill. Decided that I'd finally knock something off my list. An overnight solo inside the Superstitions, up near Flatiron. I knew the area pretty well. I'd done day hikes on Siphon Draw Trail and poked around the lower slopes plenty of times, but I've never stayed the night, at least not out there. There's plenty of stories, of course. Everybody's heard something. Weird lights, screams, disappearances. And then there's the gold, always with the gold. Lost Dutchman, buried treasure, cursed maps. It's all nonsense as far as I'm concerned, but I will admit I've peeked in a few caves just to be sure. I packed really light, tent, stove, freeze-dried meals, water, and my standard gear. I parked at the trailhead early, and the lot was half full already. A lot of day hikers come out this time of year. Everybody I passed on the trail was super friendly. A couple of families, a few college-age kids, even an older guy with trekking poles who looked like he lived out there. They all said the same thing when they heard that I was staying the night. Be careful. And not in a scared way, just kind of routine, like something you would say to somebody to drive safely. I pushed deeper into the draw, past the main trail, veering toward the base of Flatiron where I knew there would be a few primitive sites tucked along the canyon wall. I figured I'd pitch camp there, cook up something hot, and get some reading in before I'd call it a night. I obviously didn't expect anything strange, just wanted a night under the stars with no traffic noise and no one talking too loud nearby me. But the closer I got to the camp, the more the idea started to peel away. Something was off in the air, and it wasn't a smell or a sound, it was a feeling. I reached the base of Flatiron around 3 in the afternoon. The sun was starting to angle down, shadows stretching long across the canyon floor. There were a few good spots up against the rock wall where the ground flattened out just enough for a tent. I picked one tucked between 2 stone ledges and got to work setting up. The quiet out there was different than I was normally used to. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no nothing. Just the scrape of my boots and the sound thunk of stakes going into the dry dirt. As I was putting up my tent, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Across the canyon at the base of a slope, maybe 100 yards off, there were figures, 3 or 4 of them. At first, I would assume that it was hikers, maybe coming down a climbing route that I just hadn't seen. But they weren't descending. They weren't climbing either, they were just moving back and forth, slow and erratic. It was almost like they were pacing or cutting invisible shapes into the hillside. One of them raised a single arm at this odd angle, then dropped it and shifted directions. I stood there for a moment just watching them. They didn't wave, they didn't speak. and I honestly didn't even seem to notice me. Eventually, I convinced myself they were probably free climbers cooling down or doing some kind of off-trail training. I don't know. I've seen weirder. I got the rest of the camp squared away, got a fire going with some kindling that I packed in, then heated up a pouch of chili over the direct flame. The night fell faster than I expected it to. And that's when I took notice of the glow. It started off as this soft white light behind a ridge of rock off to the west, just beyond the line of camp. At first, I thought it was the moon coming up, you know? It was bright enough to spill through the rock cracks and cast this faint light in my tent. But I checked the moon phase before I came out. It was a sliver moon at night, barely anything. I stood up and walked from the firelight and scanned the sky. Sure enough, the actual moon was out, low in the east, thin as a fingernail clipping, which meant the glow was not from that. When I turned back to the rock outcrop, the glow was now gone. It didn't fade, it didn't move, it was just gone. I laughed to myself, saying that it was probably somebody with a headlamp who had ducked behind a stone or something. But the area was dead silent. No crunching of gravel, no gear clinking, no footfalls. I hadn't seen a single soul since early that afternoon. I stoked the fire higher, sat with my back to the rock wall, trying to settle in. I ate the rest of my food slowly, eyes continuously scanning the dark. I knew better than to let fear get in my head. The desert does not forgive panic. One fuck up and it will kill you. A couple hours passed. The fire was low, just embers now, faint flickers. And that's when those lights came back. This time they weren't behind the outcrop, they were over where I'd seen those figures earlier, scattered across the slope. Small pops of light, faint and bluish, one near the bottom, then another further up, then more, tracing a staggered path up the hillside. I counted 7 all told. They blinked in and out, no pattern, no source that I could at least see, just sudden little bursts of cold light, moving higher and higher, then gone. I realized I hadn't heard a single noise since they started either. No fire crackle, no night sounds, just that same empty silence. This time, I didn't wait around. I put the fire out, climbed into my tent and zipped it shut. I kept my knife nearby, and the bear spray closer. I wasn't afraid of ghosts, I was afraid of people. Weird people. Dangerous people. The hours slowly passed by. I lie still, fully dressed, breathing shallow so I could hear around me. And then just after midnight, the screaming started. It was not human, or if it was somebody who had lost all sense of humanity. The sound came tearing through the canyon like something ripping apart at the seams, high-pitched, injured, carrying a tone that I'd never heard before. I froze. My first instinct was to grab the zipper, but I didn't move. I didn't want whatever was out there to see movement. The screaming continued, getting closer now, and a second voice joined it, deeper and more raspy. Then a third. They rose and fell, sometimes overlapping, sometimes cutting off like a radio dropping signal. I didn't hear footsteps, just voices getting closer, and then suddenly, too close. The tent wall bowed inward like somebody had passed right up against it. The vinyl flexed and the whole tent started shaking like somebody had slapped it hard. I held my breath. Then came the footsteps, crunching gravel, shifting dirt, moving around me in these rapid circles. I couldn't tell if it was one person or several. I heard a sniffing sound, something wet and sloppy, like an animal breathing heavy through its nose. The whispering started then, right outside the tent. I won't lie, I nearly broke then. This was far too much for me. I felt my fingers twitch, my eyes watered. I wanted to yell, to scream back, but something inside me knew that would be the end of me. Any reaction would draw me into this, and I wanted no part. So I stayed still all night long. At least until the sun started to come back. As soon as the sky started to light up, I moved. There had been screaming outside, but the footsteps had moved off. Nothing else touched my tent the rest of the night. I saw that morning light and just went for broke. I didn't bother with breakfast, didn't even lace my boots right. Just unzipped the tent, broke camp in 10 minutes flat, shoved everything into my pack like I was being chased in the moment. I didn't see anything in the gray morning light, no figures, no lights, no marks in the dirt. It was like the whole night had been wiped clean. The only thing that remained now was the way I felt, like I hadn't slept in a week, like something was still watching me from the cliffside. I didn't take the scenic route back. I cut a straight line for the trailhead, eating up mile after mile as fast as I could without breaking into a full-on sprint. Every rock or bush looked off around me. Every crow call made me flinch. I didn't breathe right until I was back inside of the parking lot, the rows of cars shining underneath the early sun. At first, I didn't say anything to anybody because what would I say? What could I say? That I saw strange lights, heard voices in the rocks, that my tent bowed in like somebody invisible was pushing on it? Nobody wants to hear that, not without thinking you're high, dehydrated, or just straight up lying. Later on, after I got back, I found some online hiking forums, and I found stories within them. Not many, but a few. People started talking about the voices, about hearing things they couldn't explain near Flatiron. Some mentioned lights, others talked about being run off in the night. No one ever stuck around long enough to see who or what it was behind it though. A few even hinted that whatever's up there does not like people staying overnight, that it's fine if you pass through the day, but if you sleep there, you're trespassing. I don't know what I believe now, but I haven't camped solo in the soup since. Hell, I barely even want to look at them when I drive by.